You're tuned in to More Living with Jim Brogan, broadcast live from the Brogan Financial Studios at News Talk 98.7, where old-fashioned values, expert knowledge, and genuine understanding come together to give you the retirement straight talk you deserve. Jim's a former National Advisor of the Year recipient and a financial educator, and he's here today to talk about how you can live out the best years of your life. Jim and the Brogan Financial team have been helping retirees and pre-retirees across the Southeast for over 20 years in their pursuit of financial independence. You can reach them during the week at 865-862-6800. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn, because More Living with Jim Brogan starts now.
Happy Saturday, East Tennessee, and welcome to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. This is News Talk 98.7 WOKI, and today we're going to talk about a topic I think is very, very important, and it has really come to the forefront, especially since the pandemic, and that is mental disorders and mental challenges, mental illnesses. You know, they're among the most common health conditions in the United States. More than 50% will be diagnosed with some sort of a mental disorder or mental illness at some point in their lifetime. 50%, that's extraordinary. Seeking treatment and supporting loved ones who are experiencing a mental health crisis can lead to more questions than answers. How can we support our friends, our loved ones, and even ourselves if we are experiencing depression or some other type of mental disorder? And what about our young people today, as we're seeing more and more issues even with young people? Today I'm joined by PJ Alexander. PJ is a licensed therapist and holds specialty certifications in grief counseling and is a clinical certified trauma professional. PJ has been working as a therapist for more than 18 years and leads the Knoxville Suicide Griever Support Group. Good morning, PJ. Welcome to More Living.
Good morning. Thank you for having us on the show today.
Yes, PJ, give us a little bit about your background. You've been doing this for close to 20 years. What led you to this field? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
So actually, I've been working in this field for about 30 years, and actually just always had an interest in mental health, and started out actually a long, long time ago in nursing school. So one of the first times I was assigned to an individual that was actually an end-stage lung cancer, and so that kind of started my interest in just really what being with someone that was going through that. The individual had no family members, and so I ended up just staying throughout the night with that individual, just in a supportive care fashion. And I remember after the event that my nursing instructor took me aside and she said, "You know, I really think that you would make a great therapist," you know. And so that was a long, long time ago, and that's kind of how it all started, and then was able to, you know, get my degree and have then been just very interested in the field of thanatology and traumatology. So I've gone in with some specialty certifications there.
So over a 30-year career in this field, have you seen a shift in how we view mental illness and mental disorder, or how we approach it?
Yes, I think we continue to be invested in raising awareness. I do think that oftentimes individuals that I see, and I definitely hear this in individuals who have lost someone to suicide, that there still seems to be a stigma. And so, you know, we're a very stoic culture. If you look at how our, you know, macro system operates, we are accustomed to white knuckling, you know, just push through it, just try harder, just do more. And so I think when someone, you know, is experiencing something like, you know, anxiety or depression, it becomes harder for them to fulfill what maybe they would have been able to do, function in the same, you know, to the same degree that they had been able to. And so we'll allocate that timeline for a while, but then most people feel like I've got to hurry up and get over this. So, we know that about 2/3 of our people struggling with depression don't even seek help. So I think some of that, we talk about access to mental health care. There's so many issues that play into that, but also, people that worry about, can I get that time off for work for a while to get a handle on this? Or, what will happen if I can't achieve at the previous level of achievement? And so I think there's so many layers to it that are still wrapped up in that.
I think that we all have mood swings. We all deal with, sometimes some of us deal with seasonal issues where we get a little bit down or depressed. And I don't mean to use the word lightly. When you use the terminology depression or depressed, what is the definition of clinical depression?
Well, the clinical definition is that it's a mood disorder that will cause a persistent feeling of sadness or loss of interest. So it not only affects how you feel and think, but also it affects just a variety of emotional layers that we have, and also will have a physical component to it. It's more than just the blues, or like what you're talking about, Jim, when you're talking about, yes, we all have ups and downs, or like it's more people might be aware of like the seasonal affective disorder that, that people encounter when we have, darker hours of the day more than we have lighter hours of the day. So the differences I think that are important to recognize too is that it's not about someone not trying hard enough, that the feeling of that they have, because it also involves sleep disturbances. We know that can reduce our coping resiliency, the way that we, even our good problem-solving skills. We can have some agitation or restlessness with that. We can have I think the one thing that's really important to recognize here is where people can really start getting in trouble with depression is it really starts affecting your self-worth. So there's feelings of worthlessness or guilt, kind of like fixating on past failures, a lot of self-blame. When you listen to the self-talk, when someone comes in and they're talking about, they're very, very sad. The demeanor is very sad, very heavy. And then when they start talking about themselves, you can just hear just that, just harsh self-talk that they have. They might have trouble thinking, concentrating, making decisions, remembering things. So those things also can affect their ability to complete a task, to perform at the same level in the workplace. And there's there can be a lot of physical or somatic experiences that go along with that. Just the exhaustion, the fatigue, muscle aches, again, like I said, inability to sleep, affecting your appetite. And then we get really concerned when people get to the point that they're starting to have suicidal ideation, which does go along with depression. Not all depressions. If we look at the clinical data on it, not everybody, we know that not everybody that has depression completes with suicide, but we know that there's a strong correlation there.
Yeah, there's just so many layers here, and we're going to get into all of this, or a lot of this. But you mentioned a minute ago about, the stigma. It seems like the last 10, 20 years, the stigma, we've come a long way with that issue, but it's still there somewhat. How do you think we can continue to combat that?
Well, one of the things that I hope helps is through education and awareness raising about the issue of mental illness. And, here in Tennessee, we have a great organization. Of course, the Mental Health Association of East Tennessee, they have great programs that go into the school. TSPN, Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network, and of course AFSP. We all of these organizations that are trying to make sure that we're educating the general public, but also in the school system. I know that with AFSP, there's a training for teachers, parents, and even the teens, and it's called More Than Sad. So I keep hoping that through awareness-raising efforts and education that we can help with this. Like you said, Jim, at the beginning of the show, more than 50% will be diagnosed with some kind of mental disorder throughout their lifetime. We know that sometimes those can be situational. We know sometimes that, there can be a lot of trauma involved in a person's life, or a lot of loss, or, we talk about postpartum depression. So there's so many things that could come up that could be situational. But if we just get the information out there that this isn't about there's something, wrong with you, like you've got some kind of, someone that we shouldn't be around. But this is like, no, this is you and me. This is a tough world to live in, period. And so that's why our communities, supportive communities, are so important, because it's tough to do this life alone. So it's important that we have not only the education, the awareness, wonderful programs around us. We have good therapists and good, mental health clinicians out there, but also just, the smaller system of your life and your microsystem of who's there for you for support. Is it your community? Is it your church? Is it your family? Is it your friends? So just also helping people understand, what do I do to take care of myself in these situations?
We're visiting with PJ Alexander. It is an astounding statistic that more than 50, more than 50% of us will be diagnosed with some kind of mental disorder at some point in our lives. When we come back, I want to talk about how the pandemic, it's become a much more prevalent and discussed, and much more in our viewpoint with what, some of the mental challenges that have happened with the pandemic. So I want to talk to PJ about some of the ways these things have evolved and what some of those resources are that are out there. So stay with us. You're listening to More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I'm Jim Brogan, your host, on this Saturday, and we're visiting with PJ Alexander. She is a therapist that deals with mental disorders. Been in that line of work for, I think she said, about 30 years. And PJ, this is something that has become more discussed, especially since the pandemic. The pandemic was a tough experience for most people, and even though we're no longer isolated at homes, people are facing additional problems. They're just numerous in many different areas. Lost income, concerns over inflation, a lost sense of normalcy. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness each year. So what have you seen over the past few years with the pandemic? Have things gotten worse from the clinical side? We hear it being talked about. You're in it. Have you seen an increase in issues?
Yes. And, I think that we all saw during the pandemic that I know I was receiving almost double the number of requests for mental health counseling. And in the beginning, we, had to go to telehealth because many of us were not able, we were all isolating. And so
Sure.
The statistics showed us, too, that we had, there was a global prevalence of anxiety and depression. There was an increase of about 25%, I believe. And now it's been, the statistics have said that, like you said earlier, 5 people have mental health issues, but during the pandemic that doubled. So many of the people...
So roughly, just to kind of clarify, so roughly 40% of Americans at some point during the pandemic were having issues.
well, the statistic, and I don't want to misquote it, but from the World Health Organization said that it was an increase of 25% of people
gotcha.
yeah. And, the thing when you were about, what was bringing people in were some of the things that you identified that, that people, it was such a frightening period during the height of it. We saw illness like we had never seen. People were, the grief was just massive. And family members, many people that I saw, they had a death through COVID with just more than one family member. We had job loss. People had inability to connect with their community, like I was speaking a minute ago about the importance of community. So churches had to close down. Schools were closed down. Most of our, people's opportunity to have any kind of social engagement was limited. And so all of those things, we really, I think, came to a new appreciation of just how important community is to one another, that we be together and be able to, kind of walk through life together and enjoy time together. So that has, I think about the children, too, who lost almost 2 years of what they were accustomed to, normal socialization and routines.
Yeah,
And
I think what we've seen with the kids, I think 20 years from now, we're going to look back at just, what was just a horrible thing in our, with the way, with what children have had to deal with. But you mentioned the isolation, and you mentioned the importance of community. And unfortunately, when people have mental illness, and especially depression, it seems like it can lead to isolating themselves from their friends and family. What kinds of things can people do to ward off feelings of loneliness and isolation?
You're right on. So many people with depression do tend to isolate. And so they're often not going to be able to kind of push through in some of those early initial stages of, their depression that kind of limits even their physical energy to want to partake and be a part of something. And also we have to remember the impact of the whole, limbic system, where there's just such hypersensitivity to even sound, noise, etc. So sometimes we talk about, what can you do to still feel that you have a part of you're participating in. So there have been some of my clients have been pretty successful in finding some online groups that have been helpful with those that are experiencing similar kinds of issues, so they feel that there's some support. We know there's a lot of live streaming as far as like even some of the other events that go on in the community. Some of those things are still going on. So at least, they feel that they can still partake, even if they feel like they don't want to participate. So I think that has been somewhat helpful. And I think the opportunity we have to also just be connected through, things like FaceTime and things like that many people have taken advantage of that as well as a way to stay connected, but not actually.
We've gotten so much more comfortable with utilizing those types of technologies that are good ways to stay connected. PJ, as a financial advisor, I know worrying about our finances can be stressful. Do you notice what type of connection is there between financial security and mental health decline?
Well, I bet you know that better than me, Jim, but from what you see every day. But I couldn't quote you the statistics on it, but I know it has really had a tremendous burden on many of our, citizens. And one of the things that we think about with financial insecurity is if I've lost my job or I'm not working full-time hours, I've lost my insurance. And so that's where we begin to talk about the real issues around access. Like we're talking about access not only to our health care, but also mental health care. If I don't have insurance, if I don't have a way to pay, I'm not going to be able to seek help. And so that worries me tremendously as a mental health professional, because some people just cannot, afford all mental health therapists accept insurance. So we kind of get in this situation with financial insecurity and not having the kind of funds that we need for people that do need help. And then it trickles down, of course, into the family. How do I take care of, my children? How do I pay for groceries? How do I pay for gas? How do I keep the rent? So it has a tremendous burden on mental health.
Yeah, and then when you see a financial barrier like that, and as you mentioned earlier, and I thought it was spot on, we have a stoic culture. And so, we tend to want to just suck it up and move forward. And then when you combine a potential financial barrier with lack of insurance or whatever, it can be intimidating. One of the things that I do see and that I've talked about on this program a good bit is some of the mental challenges of going from working full-time to being retired. Because, when we're working, when we retire, we lose initially that routine. We also have the potential to lose a lot of our social network and social structure, social support with the people we see at work. How often do you see in your clinic issues with people with the emotional side of that transition?
Frequently, because there's I think sometimes that there's a erroneous expectation that people hold, and again, it's really espoused like, oh, retire and you're gonna the golden years and all the terms that they use, and this is going to be a wonderful time of now you've poured in so much that you're just going to sit back. But what everybody forgets to tell you is that we are creatures of habit. And so we look to adaptation theory that helps us with that too, that, that we've had this new shocking thing of going from, working and being gone from home, maybe 8 to 12 hours a day. And now we're going to be home and we're supposed to be fulfilled. And so I think and again, this is right up your alley, but it's really important to plan for that from the social emotional side of it too. So how are you going to stay involved? And, I think we have tremendous opportunities for people to stay involved in community through volunteering. That's one of the rich ways. And then also, what are you going to do to keep your physical, are you going to be involved in something that will keep you involved and engaged with physical activity, which is so essential and so important, especially as you're aging. And so those are just, two of the main areas and how you get to maintain those connections with others.
Yeah, I think I talk a lot about the routine that when you get ready to retire, you really should establish, especially for that first year, a couple things every week that you do for routine. I can tell you, PJ, I'm 53. I just turned 53 years old. My wife told me that she will never let me fully retire. She doesn't want me around the house that much. So when I'm 73, I'm sure I'll still be working some, probably still doing this radio show. Tell you what, we're going to get to our next break, and when we come back, I just want to talk about some of the resources that are available in Knoxville. Also, later in the show, in the last segment, we're going to do our dollars and cents segment. We're going to talk about the emotion of investing, and it's very applicable in this challenging time we're in with the midst of the bear market we're in the stock market. So stay with us as we visit with PJ Alexander and talk about mental disorders. This is More Living with Jim Brogan on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. This is News Talk 98.7 WOKI. We're with you every Saturday, 9 to 10 a.m. and again 3 to 4 p.m. I will tell you my next class, we're currently in the middle of my UT class, the class over at the University of Tennessee's Personal and Professional Development. My next class is Thrive Financially in Retirement. It's at Pellissippi State on October the 18th and 25th. You can go to PellissippiRetirementPlanning.com to get more information, to download a syllabus. We also have a tax class, Tax Planning in the New Age, on November the 8th, also at Pellissippi Hardin Valley. And again, PellissippiTaxPlanning.com. You can find all of my upcoming classes at BroganFinancial.com if you click on classes. We're talking about mental disorders and illnesses. It's become much, much more prevalent as of late with the pandemic, always been very prevalent. As I said earlier, over 50% of us at some point in our lives will deal with some depression or some sort of other mental disorder. We're visiting with PJ Alexander, who is a therapist here in the Knoxville area. PJ, one of the things when we talk about our resources, you know, the pandemic has driven up the need for mental health services, but it has also driven clinical staffers to quit, making it more difficult for those who are seeking help here in East Tennessee. What can be done to replace these mental health providers that have quit, and are there adequate facilities in our area?
You know, I think that has been a problem that, of course, we're all becoming more aware of. And I think in our area that, of course, we're fortunate that we do have the university here. And so, you know, we know that ongoing education and training and the graduation of those that will be involved in mental health provision of care is a real asset to our area here. We do have, you know, when I was talking earlier about access to mental health services, also has a correlation to the ability to pay. So we do know in our area that we have, you know, Helen Ross McNabb, we have Cherokee Mental Health Systems, and so we do have some, you know, some community mental health services. And McNabb is actually the agency in our area that handles a lot of the crisis situations that do come in by having their mobile crisis service, and they have a crisis hotline, and they have the, you know, the emotional support line, the state crisis line, that we can lean on them for those kind of services in a crisis situation. And we know that as far as replacing those that have left the field, I'm not really sure I have the answer to that either. I think this is going to be hopefully something that maybe will catch up. And again, the provision of care through not only the agencies but the individual therapists, but let's make sure that we also, I think it needs to be brought to the forefront too, that let's make sure that people can access mental health services through the ability to pay. And I think that's a big issue. That's, I mean, we can't even tackle that one. But that is also a concern for people that don't have the access to mental health services because they don't have the ability to pay. So that also needs to be something that is looked at, and not only for us here locally, but also nationwide.
Now, on the insurance side, I mean, federal laws, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, PJ, but federal laws require insurance companies to cover mental illness and physical health issues equally. Can you talk a little bit about, just briefly, about the availability and what insurance typically does provide for? Because some people may have an assumption that they're not covered when they may be.
It's always a good idea to check that out on your insurance plan, but you're right, most insurance plans do cover mental health services. TennCare does for the children, of course. So, but we do know that some plans do not. And again, I don't have a comprehensive, list of who might and who may not. But I know our office accepts insurance, and so our billing department, they verify benefits before someone even comes so that they know up front that, yes, you're going to be covered, or yes, you'll have a copay, just like you would at a physician's office for your routine, healthcare needs. So I think it's important that people know that part of their information, especially if people are choosing insurance plans. Make sure that you understand what you're choosing and what kind of things it does cover. I think that's a helpful part of, self-education in that way as well.
Absolutely. PJ, in 2020, the city of Knoxville began a program where they paired behavioral health professionals with emergency response services. Has this been helpful, and does it go far enough?
I think the most recent information that has been coming out has been very positive about that. And because I'm not involved in that arm of it, I do want to just say I'm not well versed in that as far as what the statistics are showing us about. But we have seen that when that has gone on, that has been helpful from the standpoint that some of these calls that that our law enforcement officers do respond to so often do have an individual that's in a mental health crisis. So I do think it's been just a really positive pairing of the two professionals to work together in that way.
PJ, suicide is the second leading cause of death among people aged 10 to 34. Let's talk about our young people. 1 in 6 U.S. youth between age 6 and age 17 experience a mental health disorder each year. How can we be helping our youth cope with mental problems?
We go back to the influence that comes from all of the different systems involved in a young person's life. Of course, we're going to start with family and how well is that family, and what kind of things might also be impacting that family. What kind of issues might be going on in that family. What is the exposure to that child of some of the problems that might be going on? And so we look at not only, again, we're going to look at, are there issues with any kind of, food insecurity, financial insecurity, housing insecurity. So we've kind of got, as we'll say often, all of these issues are so multi-layered. But we also, I like to think that, again, I think we start even something as simple as, are we also helping our children learn through school, which a lot of them do learn through their health care classes, even some simple things of some good, healthy self-care or ways that they can take care of themselves, or ways to ask for help, because sometimes, maybe a child doesn't even know how to ask for help. So I like to be hopeful about that the more that we pour into children, the more that we help normalize that, this is just it's really just tough. So walk life on your own. So what can we do to help, fill them with the information that can be helpful for them to recognize when they need to ask for help? That is that's probably the bravest thing that anybody ever does, isn't it? To say, can you help me? I need help. There's
Absolutely.
No shame.
Now, you also work with the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention.
Yes.
Unfortunately, there are family members that are left behind when someone, the family that deals with a suicide. What resources are there for those people?
Well, in Knoxville, in 1996, I started the Knoxville Suicide Griever Support Group. And so we still meet every month in my private practice office on Homburg Drive, and we meet monthly. And I do not charge for that group. That is free. We also have Compass, which is also another support group that is run through the Covenant Health System. And that one also meets once a month. So I think in particular, we have two groups in Knoxville, one that help with support following a suicide. And then another arm of American Foundation of Suicide Prevention that I've been involved in for the last 15 years is the Out of the Darkness Walk. And so I serve as chairperson for the Out of the Darkness Walk, and our walk is actually next Saturday,
October 1st, right?
Yes. and it's going to be at the Cove off North Shore Drive. And so through that event, we also we view that event as also a day for those that are impacted by suicide. We not only do the walk, but we transition into a remembrance time, and we have a special focused attention for just some healing components to that day as well.
So, PJ, if people are feeling overwhelmed or showing signs of depression or certainly thoughts of suicide, who should they contact?
Well, in Tennessee now we have, nationwide actually, you can just even call 988, which is our, it's our national helpline. There's also a text that you can do. A lot of times the younger people prefer text, and so that's 741-741. There's also the National Suicide line that's 1-800-273-8255. And then, we also, again, here in the Knoxville area, that we have Helen Ross McNabb's crisis number, which is 865-539-2409. And if things are to an extreme point, or a family member, a patient, an individual is in a heightened crisis, of course, they can call 911, or they can also go to the local emergency room for a mental health assessment.
Well, PJ, thank you so much for being with us this week. Very, very important topic, and just it needs to continue to be in our awareness. We need to, we've come a long way from my vantage point with the stigma, but we still have longer to go. Certainly since the pandemic, it has become much more prevalent and something we just got to be very, very aware of. How can people get hold of you and your services?
I'm on Psychology Today. It's a listing of all the therapists, so they can go on Psychology Today and just put PJ Alexander, and my profile comes up, and what kind of things I work in, and all kind of information about just the office.
Well, PJ, thanks for being with us. Hey, before I let you go, I understand you are a Tennessee fan.
Absolutely.
What's your prediction for today?
Well, of course it's going to be the Vols. I don't know what the score's going to be. But it's going to be my Vols. Coming back.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being with us. That's PJ Alexander. When we come back in our Dollars and Cents segment, we're going to talk about the emotion of investing and how to avoid emotional mistakes. Emotion is one of the biggest enemies of successful investing. And with what's going on in the markets right now, we're in the midst of a bear market. I think it's important to understand how to manage your emotion. So stay with us. This is More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living. It's football Saturday with the Gators in town. As you listen to News Talk 98.7 WOKI, it is time for Dollars and Cents.
Want to be sure you are getting the most out of your retirement? For all the years of your retirement? That's the primary goal of More Living with Jim Brogan and our Dollars and Cents segment, where we provide you with an important financial tip that will help positively impact the quality of your life in retirement. And now, here's Jim with this week's Dollars and Cents tip.
Emotion is one of the biggest enemies of successful investing. How can we manage our emotions in difficult and choppy markets like we're dealing with right now? A 2018 study published in the Journal of Financial Planning found that investors who use a behavior-modified approach to investing that removed emotion saw returns up to 23% higher over 10 years. Removing emotion means not making decisions based on the emotions we feel when the stock markets are going up and down. And there's emotions going up that can be dangerous too, when the market is surging. So one couple of ways to deal with this. One is to resist herd psychology. What is the herd doing? We know fundamentally we should buy low and sell high, but fundamentally that means buying when the herd is selling and selling when the herd is buying. Warren Buffett is famous for his phrase, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. So be very careful with the herd psychology. But let's talk about a few emotions. I've got 3 emotions here that can really negatively impact sound investing, and then how can you have a plan to deal with them? Of course, one of the biggest is fear. In a study by Dalbar in 2018, the S&P 500 lost 4.4%. But the financial analytics firm found that the average investor in 2018 lost 9.4 in a market that was down 4.4. So the average investor lost double, and that was because of panic selling. And there's just scores and scores of examples of panic selling. Now then, another problem is greed. Too many would-be investors sit on the sidelines in the early stages of market upturns out of fear, and then they start seeing dollar signs as they watch the stock market climb. Our emotion typically tells us to sell when stocks are down and to buy when stocks are up. And that's not what we want to fall into. And then frustration or impatience can also get in the way. It can make us dump fundamentally sound investments just because you get tired of waiting for them to show progress, or overreacting. It can often rob you of your best investments and ideas. So these are big enemies, especially in choppy markets like this. And so I think, how do you protect yourself against that emotion? One is understand fundamentally that when we invest at risk in the market, it should be with a long-term view. Now, what does that mean? It's a minimum of a 5-year view. So we should be looking at rolling 5-year periods, 5 to 7 years even. Now, if you've got a real long-term view, like 10 or like 20 years or 30 years, you can be a lot more aggressive and just kind of ignore what happens in the short term of the stock market. But as you get closer to retirement, it can be much more discerning or concerning. So understand stocks are always for a 5 to 7 year term. One of the keys to making money is to stay invested. And one of the ways to do that is to have an income plan that allows you to draw your income from investments that are not in the stock market. And then that doesn't mean you don't do anything. You do want to look for opportunities in choppy markets and also protect yourself from unnecessary risks. And there are ways to do that. But, you really plan for this before it happens. Now, if you haven't planned and you're in the middle of it, there's still a lot you can do. You just need to sit down and develop a plan. So with a good plan, with both a short and long-term view, you can try to eliminate or mitigate the effect of human emotion on your investment success.
That's our Dollars and Cents segment for this week. You can find this week's Dollars and Cents segment and others by visiting BroganFinancial.com.
Check us out online. We've just got tons of resources. Go to BroganFinancial.com. You can click on radio and catch all of our podcasts of our shows, our Dollars and Cents segments, also my retirement minutes that run every week on this station. You can also find out more about my upcoming classes. We've got a class in October through Pellissippi State's Community Services. Also in November, we have a one-night class on tax planning in the new age, also at Pellissippi State, Hardin Valley. Again, go to BroganFinancial.com and click on classes for that. Thank you to Riley for running the board. Thank you to our guest, PJ Alexander, to help us become more aware of mental disorders. And thank you to Jill for helping produce the show. We've discussed mental health because greater mental health provides for more living so you can live the best years of your life your way. Thank you for tuning in this week. Go Big Orange. Let's beat them Gators. Have a very blessed weekend. This is News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
The views expressed by Jim Brogan and his guests are not that of Cumulus Media. Any discussion of financial, legal, and tax planning strategies is not intended to be individualized advice and is general in nature. Always consult with your advisor for advice specific to your needs. This program's content does not represent a recommendation of any particular security, strategy, or investment by Jim Brogan or Brogan Financial Incorporated.